Mr. Keillor, we're very pleased that you've taken time to speak to us. We are preachers, 2,000 some preachers, gathered for a festival of homiletics in May of 2008 in Minneapolis, and we're very pleased that you're here to have a conversation with us about preaching. Preaching is related to storytelling, and you are a master storyteller. We enjoy your program and read your material and find inspiration for our sermons. What about storytelling and your childhood? Did you grow up hearing stories?
My great Uncle Lou Powell came to visit us. He was a great visitor. He was the only really sociable person in our family. He was a salesman. That's how he made his living, and he just loved to be with people. He loved my father, and my father had gone to work for my great Uncle Lou in the heart of the Depression. My uncle owned a gas station, and my dad pumped gas for him. So they had this connection, and Uncle Lou sat, and he told us stories, and he just did it unselfconsciously. Stories did not have a beginning or an end. They just continued on. And the fascination for a child was to hear firsthand about a world that existed before you were born. This, to me, was endlessly interesting.
Mm-hmm. You grew up in Minnesota.
Anoka.
Yeah, and you've lived in other parts of the world. Do people tell stories everywhere, or is it a particularly Midwestern kind of experience?
It's a universal, I think, but it happens only under the right circumstances. Nobody is going to interrupt you somehow and tell a story. Stories just sort of come out of the circumstance. Riding with somebody in the front seat of a car on a long car trip, that's one of the best places for stories. Sometimes people in bar rooms, with a little bit of alcohol, might achieve something like the same thing. But I think boredom is a crucial requirement for stories. For that reason, it's very hard to tell stories to kids because they have so much else going on, and there's a lot of adrenaline running in them, and they're bouncing around. For some reason, I lay on the floor listening to my Uncle Lou tell stories about the farm down in Iowa and Charles City and the house burning down and all of his great stories. I don't know what magic he had, but it's hard to get an audience.
In your childhood, did you have any inspirational preaching? Were there preachers who affected you, molded you, shaped you? And what kind of experience did you have with preachers as you grew up?
They terrified me. That was their job, to terrify us, not to inspire us. I grew up in a small fundamentalist sect, and they were evangelicals. There were only a few preachers who really had the call to preach a revival sermon, but the ones who did an incredible job of it. We boys were always pushed down to the front rows, and this was hardcore, no gloves preaching. The preaching had one purpose, and that was to reduce you to tears, to reduce you to pudding, and to have you come forward weeping and kneel down and give your life to the Lord, as the people around you sang, just as I am without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou biddest me come to thee. O Lamb of God, I come, I come. It was the most emotional preaching, and some people went forward many times. Mm-hmm. It was so powerful.
Were you among those reduced to tears at any point?
I resisted being reduced to tears. Did I? Yes, I guess I did once. I think I was about 13, and I came down forward in response to Brother Tompkinson's preaching. I was convicted of sin, but also I was perpetually convicted of sin, but I also felt for a fact that if I did not come down front, I would be a Jonah in my family's car as we drove home, and it would be struck by a train, and they would all be killed if I did not go down and do this now. My entire family would be wiped out. God's judgment on me inflicted on my family.
It's pretty fierce preaching.
Pretty fierce preaching.
But you responded appropriately.
I did, yes.
What about today? Do you listen to much preaching today?
I'm an Episcopalian today, and in the Anglican Church, in the liturgical church, as in the Catholic Church, it seems to me that preaching does not have the same function. And I miss the preaching, but at the same time I appreciate the homily, which is a different thing from the sermon.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe the differences, homily, sermon?
A homily is a postcard, and a sermon is a full-fledged letter.
Uh-huh. What's it like being in the pews? You obviously are before audiences all the time, but on Sundays, there you are in the pew. What's it like to be in the pew, listening to the preacher?
Well, what's it like in the pews? It's very instructive, for someone like myself who earns his living, among other ways, by talking to an audience. You learn how fragile attention is, how extremely fragile it is, mm-hmm. and how the man or woman in the pulpit has your attention for a very brief window at the beginning. Mm-hmm. How easily this is lost. This does not change as you get older. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a church, in a fundamentalist group, in which you sat in Bible study for 2 hours, as chapters in the Book of Chronicles were expounded upon. But in your maturity, in your old age, your span of attention it's not as large somehow. It's reduced. Mm-hmm. So that the man or woman in the pulpit has to seize your attention and keep it, and is ever in danger of losing it. You're holding water in your bare hand when you get up and talk to people.